the Stone family, and they um, gave it to OSU with the condition that it would be a biological field station. And it's been up there since the early 20th century. The lab before was at Cedar Point, so it's the oldest freshwater biological field station in the country. And I've been going up there since the mid 90s. When I was an undergrad, I fell in love with it. I took 3 1-week classes, and every summer except for one, I think I've been up there.
Wow. So you bring undergrads to that location every summer and basically study what's going on at Lake Erie. Is that the bottom line?
Well, that's part of the program, and actually, they come from all over. I had a student this summer from Southern Miss, University of Southern Miss, home of Brett Favre.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So we get people from Arizona sometimes, California. They all come up to Stone Lab. We have a Stone Lab research experience for undergraduates that brings in people from a lot of places. This year I had a student from Bowling Green. So it's a lot of OSU students, but there's also more, and then they do workshops for high school and middle school in the fall and spring, and they also do lots of programs for the general public.
Wow. Now, is there a staff full time there at the lab? 52 weeks out of the year.
Yeah, during the winter it drops to about 5 people, but there is a full time staff. The island itself is closed down at Halloween and then reopens in late March. But from late March to Halloween, it's just jam packed with lots of stuff going on.
And that has to be. I saw some of the pictures. That has to be it's a real tough way to spend the summer. Come on, let's be honest about the things, Douglas. That looks like a real tough gig you got going.
Well, I don't complain about it, but people think I'm not on vacation. I'm busy 6 days a week.
Sure.
We get Sunday off to rest, and teaching 3 days a week during the term, and then doing research with students the other 3 days.
That's fantastic. Now, when you say you teach, what are the types of subject matter that you deal with?
I teach a general ecology class for 5 weeks, and then I do a 1-week kind of intensive field ecology upper level for teachers and grad students.
Huh, okay. And the subject matter, when you talk ecology, I'm one of those 70s guys that had, Earth Day and all those kind of things. What are the subjects that you get into when you deal with ecology like that?
Well, basically, it's about interactions with organisms in the environment, with organisms and other organisms, with organisms and people, with people in the environment. And in both classes, I make sure to use Lake Erie as much as I can, because that's what the awesome thing is. You walk outside the classroom, you can take a plankton sample. You can't do that on main campus.
Yeah, no, that's impossible. It's a great field study. And in fact, I've been reading some of the articles here recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Great Lakes basically the largest body of fresh water in the entire world. Am I right?
Yeah, we have about 1/5 of all the accessible fresh water in the whole world.
And that's something that has been really a major issue, especially in the last few years. Go back 2 years ago when Toledo had such a problem with their water source.
Yeah, that actually, I live in Perrysburg, so I was actually one of the people affected by the Toledo water crisis. I was actually coming home from Stone Lab. I usually come home about the end of July, beginning of August, and I had heard the night before that it was happening, so I stopped on Catawba and got some water on my way home. But that's made the last 2 years very busy for me.
Oh, I bet it has. Now, before that, since you've been going back that long, let's go back through the history of this lake, because you've seen it. I mean, you're a very fortunate person to have been able to study this now for basically 20 years. 20 years ago, what did you see in that lake compared to now?
20 years ago was probably the best the lake has been since maybe settlement times. It was the one thing that we had that was a problem at the time was the introduction of the zebra and the quagga mussels
Mm-hmm.
from the Black and Caspian Sea region of Europe. Now, um, other than that, we had really worked a lot to decrease the amount of phosphorus coming into the lakes, worked a lot on toxins, worked a lot on a lot of things. And when I was growing up, Lake Erie was on the comeback, and there weren't algal blooms, or they were very minimal. Um, the water was a lot clearer. Um, there was no problem with the toxins at the time. So I've really seen it swing the other way back to, the stories I heard in the early 70s with the bad algal blooms and, of course, the Cuyahoga River burning
Sure.
and all that,
All those
which
fun things.
which kind of facilitated Earth Day starting.
Yeah, no, it really did. Now, so the history of, if we go back through really the history, let's go back now because you've studied, past that. Uh, when did the Great Lakes, when did Lake Erie start to notice some changes? I mean, back in obviously in 1850, there wasn't much that was affecting that, so it was probably a beautiful body of water.
Well, actually, there were changes as early as the late 1800s because a lot of the fish species were overfished at that time.
Okay.
Things like the lake whitefish um, were driven basically to extinction in the lake by overfishing. Then the sea lamprey got in, and that ruined the lake trout fishery.
Mm-hmm.
So, although I love my yummy yellow perch sandwiches and people love to catch walleye, it's a very different fishery today than it was 150 years ago.
Huh, I'll be darned. I mean, my wife, Kathy, is a big whitefish fan. It's still a fish you can get out of Lake Michigan when you go over to Michigan and take a vacation over there. But that was a predominant fish back in the 1800s.
Yeah, the fish hatcheries that are now part of, well, the ODNR owns one, and Stone Lab, one of our research buildings, is an old whitefish hatchery. That's what they were trying to do, is bring the numbers back up, but they never succeeded.
Huh, I'll be darned. So back at that day, when we're talking about the late 1800s and into the early part of this 1900s, the biggest problem was an overfishing problem.
Yeah, I'd say that, and we were starting to grow in population, put more sewage, raw sewage at that time. So that was a problem. And then as more and more people lived in the area, early 20th century, more and more phosphorus. And then we got to the point that, bring us to Earth Day again in the
In the 70s.
70s.
Okay. So at this point in time now, we have a situation where you see the greening of the Great Lakes has two meanings to it at this point in time. One of them being all the green algae that we've watched grow, and I guess.
Yeah, this is if you can see this on the internet, this is my blue-green algae shirt.
There you go.
I always wear this for talks.
Yeah.
Because this is about the color you'd see. It's a little fluorescent, but this is kind of what it looks like from the satellite.
Yeah, I've seen some of the satellite pictures at this point in time, and basically now, do we still have a problem with raw sewage? Is that still an issue anymore?
There is a problem with combined sewer overflows, and that's mainly a large city problem. And for example, Toledo and Cleveland are building large storage units underground where they can put the water until they can treat it. Okay. As we have it now, our sanitary and storm sewers are combined. So when there's a huge amount of water in a big storm, that will flush all the sewage out as well, because the treatment plants can't treat that volume of water and sewage. So what they're doing is they're going to contain it and then treat it slowly, and then we won't have that problem anymore. But this is going to cost. It is costing billions of dollars, and it's taking probably decades to finish.
Sure. Well, I know that's an issue. It's been an issue right here in Williams County as far as trying to keep the two separated, keep the storm sewers and the other sewers separated from one another, and then also going out into more of the rural areas where you still don't have a sewer system. Okay, you're still in the old-fashioned way. You're not in an outhouse anymore, but you don't have a centralized sewer that we're starting to build around here too. But I think that's part of the critical part of this problem, isn't it, Huh?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't maybe locally,
Okay.
but it's a very small part of the whole phosphorus story. Would be the the septic system problem.
Okay.
That's a very important problem in rural areas because we haven't really paid attention to them. We built them and then they've outlasted their lifetime. Most of them are, well, I'd hate to say most. I don't have the numbers, but many of them have failed and are leaching nutrients and sewage and things.
Sure.
So that really is dwarfed by the amount of inorganic fertilizer that is put on crops and then runs off. That's the big. I've seen like 80% of the nutrients come from that.
Okay. All right.
So that's the big one to tackle.
That's the biggest problem at this point in time. Okay,
Yep.
Well, good. Doug Kane is our guest right now. He's a biology professor at Defiance College. He spent the entire summer over on Lake Erie. We're going to get a little more detailed into what he found and what he saw and how we go about changing this thing. It's 20 minutes after the hour of 11 o'clock right now, so it's time for ONN News. When we come back, we'll get back into the greening of the Great Lakes with Doug Kane. Cool, man.
Wow,
Knock this out.
that's easy.
How's that?
It's just like talking to you.
Good. Man, I am so happy you're here, and I really would hope that we can keep you going because what I'm trying to do with this, we play music pretty much from 9 to about 11 every day. It's just music, some commercials, and then I'm trying to do 11 to 12 something off the music side. Talk to guys like you, talk to county commissioners, talk to anybody that might be coming through. Fridays I've been trying to bring music in here, so I've had live bands in here. Yep, I've had a live band in here every Friday for the last 6 weeks. Feely kicked it all off 2-3 months ago.
Did he play?
Yeah, barely. Okay, Douglas
Yeah.
anymore. He had his guitar and he'd give
Played
you
a couple
bars.
bars
chords and he'd do maybe the chorus to a Cake song or he'd, as he was ruminating about whatever the hell he was talking about, he'd fire in a Beatles song for a couple lines or two or whatever. Likely was in here one day for the whole day, for the whole hour, all by himself, and it's kind of a conversation back and forth again of how'd you get started, who'd you played with, because I think this area is just so full of musicians, artists. I'm trying to get all these guys. I'm going to bring Smith in here one of these days.
Smith. Oh wow, you could go all day with him talking.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to get about an hour of 11 to 12, maybe noon to 1. I actually do a racing show on Monday with a guy who's into racing really big, and we've got people listening all over the country right now.
Oh wow.
People calling in from all over the country who are just into NASCAR and into little sprint car racing and stuff like that. So the first couple hours music, then the second couple hours I'm trying to bring in just like this. I think this is an important thing for people to talk about. We need to make sure that the Lake Erie and the Great Lakes are taken care of. I don't, however the hell that happens. I'm not a huge necessarily man-made global warming guy, but I do admit that we got problems going, and so I'm always possibly wrong. Okay, I'm willing to admit that I don't know everything, so let's bring people in who are studying it and get their damn opinions. And I really hate going with national media most of the time because you don't know whether those guys are just out for taking care of money. Oh, this guy's funding me, so you bet, man. That'll turn you purple if you do that. Well, bullshit. Let me talk to the guy that's out there who sees the guy turn purple, okay? I mean, that's what I'm after. I want the guy that I can kind of trust that is, he's going to tell me, yeah, you do that, you're going to turn purple, okay? So that's what we've been trying to do. So I appreciate you being here.
No problem.
And as we go, I'd love to be able, I've had a couple of different professors on from DC that have talked about all the stuff going on over in Britain when they pulled out of the EU. I can't remember the guy's name, but one of their history guys was on with me. And I just want to get a local perspective of people that I know and that I have some confidence in when we do this stuff. All right, here we go, man. We're going to go back and do this some more. How's that?
Okay.
And it's about 25 after the hour of 11 o'clock right now. If you're just tuning in, I have Doug Kane, who is a biology professor from Defiance College. And what you've missed so far is he's been at the Stone Lab for the entire summer. And he claims he's been working. He looks nice and tanned and relaxed and everything else for Doug Feely's out there listening right now. You can see him on the webcam right now. He looks like a guy who's pretty much had a nice, easy, cushy summer. But I know that they work very hard for 6 days trying to study what is going on at the Great Lakes. And to this point, to bring you up to speed, we've relatively identified that early on a big problem in the Great Lakes was the overfishing situation that cost us some fish that were there. And nowadays it's become more of a human problem, Doug. So let's get into that, because I know as we were talking about, everybody is aware of what happened in Toledo 2 years ago. Where do we stand this year in comparison to 2 years ago when you take a look at that lake?
Well, this is what we'd call in ecology a natural experiment. We had a very dry summer this year.
Sure.
So we had very little runoff from the fields. So we had very little in the way of nutrients making it from the land into the rivers, into the lake. Mm-hmm. So we're having actually a pretty mild algal bloom this year. It's still there. You can see it in the satellite footage. It's mostly concentrated right now around Maumee Bay and a little bit east of that, but nothing like last year. We had a very large early bloom because if you remember, it rained all of June basically, yes. Almost every day, and that actually flushed a lot of the water and nutrients a little further east, and it was by the islands by Christmas in July. I guess that was the green part of Christmas, was the algal part.
So it was nicknamed Christmas in July because of the...
Oh, no, they have a holiday up at Put-in Bay called Christmas in July.
Okay.
And that was just there. For time reference, that's when it was up there, which was very early. Usually we see it in the islands in September, October.
Sure.
So every year is different. My advisor said there's no such thing as an average year, and I'm starting to believe that the meteorology controls a lot of this. I'm also learning that weather patterns and things like that.
Sure. So right at this point in time, we don't expect to have the same problem with the drinking water in Toledo this year because of the drought, the almost drought conditions we've had so far this summer.
Well, that's one reason. A second reason is we're doing a lot more monitoring and research on the issue. There's a lot more early warning. Mm-hmm. Now we have a series, and I've been working on this with a whole group of 8 or 9 colleges and universities and some consulting companies and things, a whole set of buoys basically from Michigan shoreline all the way past Cleveland, that will tell us when the algae's there, how much is there, other parameters like dissolved oxygen, water temperature, things like that. And they even now have some underwater vehicles that can go around and take samples, and it's really getting really high tech and kind of cool. I don't like that it was a problem like this that had to get like this to facilitate having this technology, but these buoys can be out there all the time where we can't. They can take samples every 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
So that really gives us a heads up, and a lot of the treatment plants have buoys right at their intake, so they know what the water is like that's going to be coming into their plant.
That is amazing. So you have a buoy that can sample the water, can do a scientific test on that water, mm-hmm. and then obviously with the way that we communicate nowadays, I'm sure, are they wireless basically?
Yeah, these are actually, you can look online if you type in Great Lakes harmful algal bloom observing system or something like that, some words like that, you'll find that you can find these online, and it'll give you what it's out in the lake right now.
That's amazing. And I think I've read too. There's been a couple of articles. I know you guys just finished up your work, so that's probably people now publishing articles and newspapers, scooping them up and starting to promote them a little bit. But I think I saw one yesterday where you're also studying the current. How does the current in the Great Lakes move these blooms around too at the same time?
That's NOAA, the Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
They have been doing a lot of kind of that meteorology and tracking the water movements and then how that affects blooms moving. They have something called a HAB tracker. If you type HAB, which stands for harmful algal bloom tracker, and GLERL, NOAA, NOAA, you'll find that product, and that is something they've worked on. They are also going to be putting out in the very near future. They did a test run at Put-in Bay, something that can do near real time. So it's maybe a couple hours off toxin production. They can test the toxins in the water and get an answer back in an hour or two.
Really?
Now that's something that it's kind of a holy grail to be able to know the toxins right away, because that's what we're most interested in, and we haven't been able to. It takes several hours, half a day right now.
When you talk toxins, what types of toxins are you finding out there right now?
The main toxin that we worry with the microcystis blooms, which is what the blooms are predominantly in Western Lake Erie in the offshore, is a liver toxin called microcystin. Mm-hmm. That's also produced by another type of algae, also blue-green algae in Sandusky Bay called Planktothrix. So that's a liver toxin. It's killed several people. This fits in with the Olympics in Brazil. There were several dozen people killed that were on dialysis when untreated water went right through the system. This was I think in the 80s.
Okay.
But it can kill. Nowadays, we worry more about, pets dying. There's lots of examples of that. But, you will get sick if you take a bunch of swallows of the water. You probably won't. You'd probably have to eat a hockey puck to die.
Okay, sure. For the average person who is relatively healthy,
yeah,
they can probably deal with quite a bit of it.
Plus,
for somebody who maybe their system's a bit somehow not as strong as everybody else's, that it could be fatal. Is what you're telling me.
Plus, you're going to realize that it's there when you see the bloom and it doesn't smell good and it doesn't look good. Dogs, on the other hand, will just go in and start drinking.
Sure, they'll drink antifreeze, obviously, as we've seen. So they're pretty much into anything that's liquid. They're going to ingest, and then at that point in time we have troubles. Okay, so those are the ones that you're most concerned about.
Yeah, there are other toxins. Some of the other algae we have can produce neurotoxins. There's kind of the big three we used to have: Anabina, Aphanizomenon, and Microcystis, and we used to call them Annie, Fanny, and Mike, until Anabina got a new name. So it's the alga formerly known as Anabina. Now it's Dolichospermum. So now it's Dolly. So now it's Dolly, Fanny, and Mike.
Okay.
And Planktothrix doesn't have a good name. Maybe I'll call it Trixie. That sounds like a good name for it. But
that fits, yeah.
But those are the main culprits around here that we have to worry about, and it's mainly the liver toxin, and then sometimes the neurotoxin. There is also one that usually forms at the bottom of Maumee Bay. That's called Lingbia, and that can produce some skin toxins.
Okay.
That's the one that piles up on the shore there. You may have seen pictures of that.
Okay, so that's and that will cause actually some rashes on skin.
Yes.
Primarily, is that what happens to that?
Mm-hmm.
So that at that point in time, you're trying to keep people out of the water because it's close to the shore, or it's
Mm-hmm.
right there for the kids to jump around.
It's right on the beach.
Yeah, it's on the beach itself, on the sand
Yep.
at the same
It
time.
washes up.
Okay, so we have the one we're going to deal with liver, and then the neurotoxins. What kind of symptoms will we see out of people that would be infected with that?
Just general, probably memory problems, and I mean, if it was bad enough, seizures and things like that. But
Sure.
I don't think it would. Hopefully, it wouldn't get that. We'd realize before then.
Now, there's been, and I remember there was a dead area in Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm.
Lake Erie, is it still there? Do we still have a dead zone?
Yeah, the dead zone is something that, at least from my point of view, and reading a lot of the research and doing a lot of it, is something that's always going to be with us. They've done studies looking at organisms that can live at low oxygen, and that they've been there for several thousand years in that area. So it looks like we've always had this. Now we've made it worse and bigger and last longer since the 70s, and then we made it better, and then it's gotten worse again. And then once again, there's no average year. I don't know how to say what's going on with it this year, because I've really moved over to doing more of the buoy research and less of the dissolved oxygen the last 2 years.
Sure. So initially, the idea, though, with this area being very lacking in oxygen, was it just the depth of the water, or what was causing it before the human beings got involved?
So it's kind of like Goldilocks. It's just except it's just wrong. It's just the wrong depth.
Okay.
If a body of water is very deep, there'll be plenty of oxygen in it, and then what happens during the summer is lakes stratify. So the top gets warm, the bottom stays cold. You may have even found this in a pond when you've been swimming and you're up at the surface and it's warm, and you dive down, and if you go deep enough, it's cold. So that's called stratification. When that happens, there's no more oxygen getting from the surface down in the bottom. And the central basin is not deep enough to have lots of oxygen, and it gets all depleted. The western basin, most of it, but not all the time, is shallow enough where it usually gets oxygen at the bottom.
Okay.
So the central basin has always had this problem, but with putting more algae into it, what happens is that dies, settles at the bottom, bacteria break that down, that process takes oxygen. They use oxygen, and there's critters in the bottom that use oxygen. This causes the oxygen to deplete, and then there's no oxygen for fish or invertebrates. So you either have to move or die.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Now, is Lake Erie, am I right, is Lake Erie the most shallow of all of the Great Lakes?
Yeah, it's much shallower than any of the other Great Lakes. It's also the southernmost, and those two things combined make it the warmest.
Okay.
So one thing that we're seeing above 80-degree temperatures this summer in the Western Basin. So some people are predicting records throughout the Great Lakes because we didn't have much ice either.
Yes.
We had a very mild winter. So everything warmed up fast, and it's continued to get warmer.
And basically, we need that. We need that good, solid winter frost and that ice layer on top of those lakes to keep them regulated. Is what you're telling me.
Well, that's Lake Erie is actually regulated mostly water-wise by what happens in the upper lakes and the runoff, snowpack, and things like that. Okay. Very little comes from our actual basin or direct precipitation. And there's some direct evaporation, obviously, and when there's no ice, there's going to be more of that. But, yeah, we've seen that in the last couple years we've had less ice, but we had a really big ice year, I think, 3 years ago when we had all that snow?
Yes.
So, like I said, there's no such thing as an average year.
Yeah, no, it's unusual, and I'm sure that makes it a little more difficult for you guys to be able to actually pinpoint, here's our problem all the time, doesn't it, huh?
That's why we have to look at long-term monitoring.
Sure.
That was one of the problems in the 80s. Everybody walked away, said, oh, everything's getting better. Let's stop monitoring. And then things got worse again, and we didn't have that data to compare. So there's a lot of, in the 80s, there's a lot of places where we just don't have the data to compare.
Well, now the money that goes in to fund this at this point in time, is that state dollars, federal dollars, a combination? How does that work?
All the above.
Okay.
There's, for me, my funding is mostly, the yearly funding is to work up at Stone Lab with the undergraduates. I get some of the research done there. Also have some grants from the Ohio Higher Ed, which used to be the Ohio Board of Regents, Ohio Water Resources Center at OSU, and then the Lake Erie Protection Fund. I've had several projects funded through that, and I've got one actually going on. While I'm doing this, I have a student that's been working in Defiance, working on wetlands and looking at how we can prevent nutrients from leaving farm fields to fix this problem all the way up in the watershed. So I go, it depends where I am at the time of year. So I go from up in the farms to the lake.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, we need to step away again. It's time for the Ag News at this point in time, and then I want to get into exactly that, because we've kind of touched on that as far as the runoff from the fields and the fertilizers and all that are the biggest culprit, as you're pointing out. But I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing to maybe help some of those things, and what your perspectives are for the future of this. It is 20 minutes before 12 o'clock. I have Doug Kane, who is a biology professor from Defiance College and has spent his entire summer on Lake Erie studying all the algae problems and all the different things that are happening over there. And we will come back to wrap up our conversation with Doug right after this. Thanks for joining us. Cool. I forgot I had to have this one on the stream, on the video stream. That's how I'm getting my sound. You could hear me off of that mic, which is, I'm kind of in the background. That makes it a little better. On the radio side, we're both mic'd and everything's good. Cool, man. I love it. Like I said, I appreciate you coming over, and I really want to stay in touch with you and on top of this, because I really am into what's going on and what is the problem. I mean, if we are the guys that are causing it, then I want to figure out how to change it. And if we can't change it, then we need to figure out how to deal with it, because I ain't gonna be here forever, but my kids and my grandkids need to deal with some of this stuff too, you know? So is the dead zone then, say, in Lake Michigan and Superior a lot bigger?
They don't have dead zones.
They don't have any dead
except
zones.
Except in Green Bay, there's a dead zone.
Okay.
And in Saginaw Bay.
Really? And
Yeah.
Is that going back to?
The Saginaw Bays is not as predominant. Green Bay, yeah, they're all the same thing. They're shallow bays where all the nutrients come in from agriculture.
Okay. But just because of the fact that Erie is so shallow,
yeah,
that's why it becomes such a big problem here.
Yeah, if the other lakes, and plus there's not as in Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, the general lake doesn't get as much nutrients either.
Okay. Is that again because of the amount of water, the volume of water there compared to?
It's also the land use around it. There's not much agriculture around Lake Superior.
Yeah. Okay.
And only specific places in Lake Michigan.
Yeah, because mostly Lake Michigan is people sitting out on the beach with a cocktail in their hand, watching somebody go boating in front of them, pretty much. Huh?
Yeah, Lake Erie and Lake Ontario have the most agriculture, and Lake Erie's way more than even Lake Ontario.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is bordered by all of those farmers.
Well, also, it's this way on the North Shore too, in Canada. So that's their big agricultural area.
Huh. That's pretty cool. Hey, again, I'm glad you came in, and I really want to keep doing this. And as you get anything new that you think I would be interested in,
yeah, card.
The folks that I have listen to this thing are
Local.
40 and up, and they're local. Okay, I mean they're a little more into hearing about different things that are, on the front page of the paper. I mean that's the reason for the music too. I mean it's more their style of music. It's not WBNO's a little more of a hard rock station. We're a little softer, so you do have a little more of an older audience, and I think they're into those kind of things. And so anytime you get into something like that, I would love to even just get you on the telephone for 15 minutes as you get a report back in. That would really be neat to have. I'd love to have you on the phone. How's that? You wouldn't even have to run over here. You could sit there in your shorts and a t-shirt and a beer in your hand in your living room, and we could chat for a minute or two, okay? All right, here we go. We're about ready to go again.
Okay.
Doug Kane is our guest right now, and up until the top of the hour. And Doug, real quick, we covered something off of Mike that I really want people to understand. The oxygen, the lack of oxygen in Lake Erie, you don't see that in Lake Michigan and some of the other lakes. What's the cause of that?
So the other lakes, they have the upper lakes especially have much more water. They're much deeper than Lake Erie, and the land use around them is predominantly forested. You do have these local dead zones, mostly in Green Bay is the place where you find these. Sometimes Saginaw Bay has some issues, but it's you just have to be the wrong depth with the wrong characteristics of land use and incoming water.
Okay. First of all, let's go back, because farming is such a big industry for us, and it's so important for our area and in all of Ohio, around where we're at especially. What are you seeing right now, and what have we tried to do, first of all, to maybe try to at least cut back on some of the problems that we're having?
Well, I think the great thing is that many farmers are working at what are called the 4 R's, getting certified for that. That's the fertilizer should be put in the right place at the right time, at the right rate, at the right form of fertilizer. So, for example, injecting fertilizer next to where your seeds are put down is better than broadcast fertilizing. There's now actually in laws about not fertilizing on frozen ground and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I think that will help a lot. The magic number that we need to get back to having some blooms but not big, huge blooms is a 40% reduction in soluble and total phosphorus coming into the lake. So we need to almost cut it in half. So that's going to take the whole basin. The Maumee watershed is the largest watershed to the Great Lakes. It's the largest river that goes into the Great Lakes. So it's a big problem, and it's going to take everybody working on it.
Sure. Now, you touched on some things as far as maybe reestablishing some wetlands that have been eliminated in the past, or you have one of your minions out there working on that here right at this point in time. Is there hope, and is that a legitimate strategy to help?
Well, I think it's a legitimate strategy. The problem that I mean, scientifically it works. Mm-hmm. So if you we used to have the Great Black Swamp here.
Yes.
That was great at holding in water and holding back nutrients. What the problem is it's going to take people. I'd say it's going to take incentives, very big incentives, for people to take land out of production and make permanent wetlands.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's going to be very expensive, and that's kind of the hard. That's a hard sell right now. I'd say, using less fertilizer, doing it the right way, would be the first place that people would want to start.
Can you get to that 40% reduction with just those?
Oh no, there's a whole. There was just a report that came out from that school up north that.
Okay, I won't say it.
Yeah, that it was actually really good, and I think it was criticized too much. that went through a number of different scenarios. That you can't just do this one thing. It's going to be a whole suite of, 5 or 6 things that you have to do at the same time. And the key thing is that it has to be adaptive. So there's something called adaptive management. So you tweak things, and it's not like, once again, you go away and come back 10 years later. You're constantly, this didn't work, so we'll try more of this. We'll try more buffer strips. Well, now we find out the phosphorus is coming through the tiles, so we need to do something like better water management, putting in controlled drainage structures that'll keep the water back. So it's not going to be one size fits all through the whole basin. And the thing that's tough again is that the studies have found that these, what we call hot spots, where a lot of phosphorus is coming, changes every year, and throw that all into a changing climate, and it's not impossible. We've done the math. It can be done.
Okay.
But it's going to take everybody wanting to do it.
Yeah, no, and that there's no doubt about that. It's not very profitable to leave your farmland as marshland compared to raising corn or wheat or whatever that you're going to put out there. For a farmer, that's how he makes his living, or she makes her living nowadays. So it's difficult to be able to go in and say, okay, Doug, you're going to have to take a 20% cut in pay next year because we need all this on the fringe of your fields to be marshlands nowadays, isn't it, huh?
Mm-hmm. That's why it's going to take incentives. It's going to take money.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of money coming in, I will say, federal, state, regional monies. I think we're at a lot better place than we were 10 years ago when we saw this problem was starting, but we didn't know why.
Sure.
I think we know why now and how. It's just the will people do it is that we're at that stage.
Yeah, I've had a lot of folks who have made over a cold beer or a warm cup of coffee comments to me that I've always found kind of funny to listen to, but at the same time in the back of your brain they say, well, why don't you just put a boat out there somehow and scoop all that stuff up off the top? Okay, how can't we harvest this in any way? Would that be at all help?
This is something that people I think have in general have don't see this unless they actually go to the lake.
Sure.
Is how massive Lake Erie is. Even though it's the smallest of the Great Lakes, it's huge.
Yeah.
And the scale of doing things to do that would be impossible.
Okay. I had 3 guys in here from the University of Washington who were biking for cancer across the country.
Mm-hmm.
They actually stopped in Bryan, and on their trip across to Cleveland and then to Boston, they went past the Great Lakes. And the one comment the one young guy made, because they're used to the Pacific Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
out where they're at, out by Seattle, he said, this almost looks like a small ocean to me.
Well, that's why they're called inland seas.
Sure.
That's they're governed. They're the scale where large physical forces affect them, like the oceans, that don't work in your pond behind your house, which makes it tough when something's so big. And same with, if you look at the scale of how big the Maumee watershed it is, getting 40% of the phosphorus, stopping 40% of that from coming in, that's a big task.
Major job. Major job. All right, let's get off the phosphorus and the algae for just a second. The state of the lakes for fishing. You touched on zebra mussels a little while ago. We've talked about. You see the carp that we're worried about all the time getting into our lakes. How is the state of the wildlife inside that lake right now?
Well, I had several yummy yellow perch sandwiches, so that's as long as those keep coming, I'm happy with it. I had friends catch a lot of walleye. The walleye fishing has been good. When we do trawls, there's a lot of walleye, yellow perch, pretty good. But you mentioned that the Asian carps are knocking at the door. Well, I guess they'd knock if they had
Yeah.
arms and hands and
Sure.
fists. But yeah, that's the next thing we're worrying about and trying to stop them from coming in, because that's going to really affect everything from the fishery to the some of them are planktivorous and will eat the plankton, and there won't be enough food for, you know, yummy fish that I like to
Sure,
eat.
that you like to eat every.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's not a good thing. I agree with you. The zebra mussels, are they still a problem in Lake Erie? You don't hear a
I
lot
mean,
about them anymore.
they're there and they're going to be there. They're doing their thing. We're not going to get rid of them. We've kind of, I talk about in the near time, we're going to have to adapt to some of these things like the blooms, because it's going to take us a while to fix this problem. So we've kind of adapted to the mussels. They developed technologies to clean the pipes, to stop them from settling on the pipes. We've gotten used to them, so we're gonna have to do the same thing in the near term for the blooms. We might not be able to always go to the beach or go fishing when we want to, and it'll however mad that makes people will probably influence how quickly we get the problem fixed.
Isn't that amazing how
Yeah,
that works?
because I mean the Toledo water crisis, you know, that got a lot of people angry and got money and this rolling, whereas, you know, we knew these things were happening for a decade before, and we were telling people, and they're like, oh,
yeah, no big deal.
no, I still have water, I can still go fish, and it's really hurting the charter captains. They may be the most affected, the people that take people out on Lake Erie for recreational fishing, because with the blooms, people don't want to go into them. It smells bad. It's, you know, not a pleasant
Sure.
day trip for them.
Yeah.
So, and they've been very vocal, and they've actually stepped up. This is a good example of a group that you wouldn't expect. They actually take water samples and send them in to Stone Lab for processing, for looking at nutrients and toxins and things. So that's what I think. Like I said, everyone needs to be on board here. It's not just going to be, to get that 40% is going to be everybody working.
Well, I'll tell you what, I hope that is what happens, because you guys have identified the problem. You're not going away. Stone Lab is going to stay in place. It's been there for over 100 years now, so it's going to be there for hopefully another 100 years, and hopefully the folks that are listening right now to us and anybody else that enjoys that Lake Erie climate all the time will go along with what you need to do to make these things work. You know, that's our hope, right?
Yeah. I would hope that that if you haven't been to Lake Erie and you're listening, that you go there and realize what a not just a local or a regional or national treasure, what an international treasure Lake Erie and the Great Lakes are. Yeah. 1/5 of the world's fresh water. Lake Erie has more fish harvested each year than the other lakes combined. It's really an awesome place.
Yeah, it really is. Now, are you a Cleveland guy?
Yes, I'm originally from Cleveland, so I grew up about 2-3 miles down the road from Lake Erie, and then went to Columbus, and then to Defiance. So
Okay.
I stay, Columbus North in Ohio.
All right. We're about done here with our hour, so we'll put the hard stuff behind us right now.
Oh, okay, good. Now
Okay.
fun stuff.
Yeah, the Bucks were
Oh, the
named
Bucks
the number one football program since the last 80 years as they've been rating football programs. Your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think it's key that they said the last 80 years, because this doesn't take into account way back when. I have a feeling that if you did the 100 years, Notre Dame might be higher, and Michigan. Although I said that bad word, sorry.
You're going to get fined for that.
Yes,
I
know.
Right now is going to into that.
But yeah, I was a little surprised. I think these things always tend to skew to the recent, the way they set it up. I would have thought Alabama would have been higher, but I guess we've had a good run, and just imagine if Cooper could have ever won a big game.
Sure, heck yeah, they'd have been by far the number one program over the course of the last 80 years. All right, so how the Bucks going to be this year? You're a Buck fan. You're following them.
Yeah, I'm always optimistic that they won't lose any since the last couple of years have rolled around. But I had my Cavs finally win a championship for Cleveland, so I guess I can't hope for. Well, maybe the Bucks will win and the Indians, and it'll be a trio for me.
A little trifecta for Doug Kane. It was fun. It was really a lot of fun to see the Cavs win. Were you able to go down for the celebration?
No, this ties everything together. I was actually sampling right off of Sandusky all day while the celebration was happening. We were listening to the radio and hearing about 1.3 million people downtown.
Yeah.
And they kept on saying, well, are they going to stop this? That there's too many people in the street. Get back. And then it went on for hours like that. But, the first night I was at Put in Bay this summer was the night of Game 7. So that was a very exciting time. Yeah. Good way to start the summer.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, I'll tell you what, hopefully you get to start the summer that way every summer for the next few years. How's that? I'm not trying to be greedy because it was just fun to have one Cleveland team win one thing one time right now.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm hopeful. Browns, before I let you loose?
Browns, I'd be happy with, and I'm a season ticket holder, I'd be happy with 4 wins would be, that's where the over-under I'd put it. Okay. 4 is what I think that they can do. Anything more would be great, but I'm realistic.
Yeah, well, you have to be realistic, but I do like the new coaching staff, and I think finally we have maybe a little direction going there. So it's almost like the Great Lakes and your problems that you're facing right now. Maybe we finally have everybody's attention, and we have the right guy at the helm, I believe, here at this point.
That'd be good.
That would be good. All right, Douglas, it is now high noon. The hour has gone. It's amazing how fast that goes, isn't it, huh?
Yeah. Like 5 minutes.
I really appreciate you coming over. The information is wonderful. Keep up the great work. And please, I'd love to have you on every time you get an update that maybe something that would be interesting. Something new that's come out, something that's a change in direction, something that's bad that we need to let people know that, hey, this is not going in the right direction. Please call me.
Well, I'll be going to Brazil in January, so I might have something totally different to talk about next time.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to hear about that because all you hear right now are all the horror stories in Brazil and the Olympics at this point in time. But so far, it's been a wonderful Olympic Games. It seems like everything's working pretty well.
Everything looks great on TV too. It's making me jealous. I've got to wait 5 more months.
Oh, poor you! I feel so sorry. Is that going to be a business trip too?
That's I got a sabbatical, so I'm going to be there for 3 months, working with some researchers on reservoir water quality.
Well, I am just absolutely so sorry for you to have to spend the entire summer on Lake Erie like you do, working as hard as you do, and then a whole 3 months in Brazil, working in Brazil for those 3 months. My heart goes out to you. You'll be in my thoughts and prayers. Yeah. And if you can't denote the sarcasm in my voice, it was very sarcastic, Doug. How's that? But thanks for coming in today.
Have a great day, everyone out there.
Wonderful. Doug Kane, biology professor at Defiance College and a member of the Stone lab team over in Lake Erie every summer, has been our guest, and we thank him for being part of this today. 2 minutes after noon, time for CBS News. Cool, man.
Yeah. So what happens now? Back to music?
Yeah, now we go back to music. And, it works out pretty good. Today we do that. There's times when I'll have somebody here for the next hour. Like on Monday, we do a little sports program on Monday, and then we get done with that, and we go into this program with the racing guys that I've got. Dwayne Hancock's a local Napa guy around here, but he goes to races every weekend. He knows all kinds of different people. We've had people call from all over, racers or tracks or whatever. But yeah, now we go back to music from now till 1 o'clock. I go busting out of here and go do my real job. How's that?
What do you do? I thought you just did this.
I do this, and then I sell cable ads on the local cable system here.
Oh, okay.
So I do that.
Well, and I know you do the
Yeah.
announcing.
Yeah. And I'm doing Albion nowadays because we don't do that. Last year was the first year we didn't do any Defiance. So this year, last year we picked up with Albion, and we're going to be back up there for football and basketball this year. Which is good.
What did Defiance change or switch?
Yeah, we were part of the budget cuts. We were part of the. Hey guys, we can't do this anymore because we don't have the enrollment that we need, and so we kind of got into that one here.
So what did they end up doing? Is it just not broadcast?
Yeah, they just.